Bristol, England. Police officials investigating the killing of a member of parliament in northern England said Friday that they were focused on the murder suspect's ties to far-right extremist movements and his history of mental illness as they sought a motive for an act of violence that left Britain stunned and rippled through its politics. The killing on Thursday of the lawmaker, Jo Cox, 41, a member of the opposition Labour Party, was the first of a sitting member of parliament since 1990, and came a week before Britain votes on whether to leave the European Union. Her death brought Prime Minister David Cameron, a Conservative, and the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, together to the site of the killing, in the town of Bristol, to honour her. The suspect, Thomas Mair, 52, who lives in Bristol, was arrested shortly after the attack. In a statement on Friday, the West Yorkshire Police said examining Mr. Mair's ties to right-wing extremism was a priority line of inquiry in the effort to establish a motive. The police said his mental illness, which was not specified, was also a clear line of inquiry. Miss Cox was shot and stabbed early Thursday afternoon after getting out of her car outside the public library in Bristol, where she was scheduled to hold a meeting with constituents, the police said in their most detailed description of the attack. A 77-year-old man who tried to help was also injured. He has not been publicly identified and was said by the police to be in stable condition. This appears to be an isolated but targeted attack upon Joe D. Collins, the temporary chief constable, said. She said there was no indication at this stage that anyone else was involved in the attack. The police believe Mr. Mair was angry about political issues and had targeted Miss Cox, who supported keeping Britain in the European Union, according to a person who has been briefed on the investigation and spoke on the condition of anonymity because no one has been authorized to publicly discuss the inquiry. Investigators were looking into witness accounts that Mr. Mair used the phrase "Britain first" in speaking to Miss Cox before shooting her, though the accounts suggested that he used the words in the context of a longer statement and not to voice support for the far-right group known as Britain First. Continue reading the main story. Related coverage. Jo Cox, member of British Parliament, is killed in attack June 16, 2016. Issues of immigration and national identity have been central to the occasionally bitter clashes over the referendum on membership in the European Union, and have resulted in a tone that critics say verges on racism and xenophobia. Both sides in the debate suspended campaigning on Thursday out of respect for Miss Cox, though Vote Leave, which supports departure from the 28-nation bloc, said on Friday that it would resume campaigning over the weekend. Speaking in Bristol, Mr. Cameron said he first met Miss Cox in 2006 in the Darfur region of Sudan. At the time, she worked for the humanitarian organization Oxfam. Parliament has lost one of its most passionate and brilliant campaigners, he said. Mr. Corbyn called Miss Cox's killing an attack on democracy, blaming the well of hatred for the killing. In Bristol, about 6 miles southwest of the city of Leeds, Hikam bin Abdallah, who runs a cafe near the site of the killing, said that Miss Cox's attacker had pulled a gun. It looked like an old sawn-off shotgun, probably an old vintage one, from a bag. The attacker, he said, was shaking it very violently, perhaps because it had jammed. Next minute, he fired a shot, Mr. bin Abdullah said. He ran into the cafe, he said, and then heard another shot a few seconds later. After the firing stopped, he raced outside. It never crosses your mind that you are going to see your MP on the floor, he said. She had her head back, bleeding, and her knees up, blood down her legs. Her hair was roughed up from when he was pulling at her hair. On Thursday night, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is based in Alabama, released receipts showing that Mr. Mair had paid $620 for materials from National Vanguard Books, the publishing imprint of a neo-Nazi organization called the National Alliance. In 1999, he bought manuals for making a gun and improvised explosives. The gun used in the shooting was not homemade, according to the person briefed on the investigation, who said that Mr. Mair also had a hunting knife. The Telegraph, one of Britain's main newspapers, reported that Mr. Mayor's name was on a decade-old website listing subscribers to the I Patriot, a South African magazine published by a pro-apartheid group, the White Rhino Club. A blog post attributed to the group, dated January 2006, described Mr. Mayor as one of the earliest subscribers and supporters of I Patriot. A local newspaper, the Huddersfield Daily Examiner, quoted Mr. Mayor in an article in 2010 that described him as a client of Pathways Day Centre, a program for adults with mental health problems. The group placed him as a volunteer at Oakwell Hall and Country Park, a local attraction that includes a manor house built in 1583. "I can honestly say it has done me more good than all the psychotherapy and medication in the world," the newspaper quoted Mr. Mayor as saying. "Getting out of the house and meeting new people is a good thing, but more important in my view is doing physically demanding and useful labor." A number of neighbors described Mr. Mayor as quiet and reclusive. One of them, Diana Peters, a retired nurse, said she first met Mr. Mayor more than 40 years ago. She said that he had told her that he spent most evenings on his computer or watching television, liked to garden and took in stray cats. Miss Peters said she was absolutely devastated to learn of his arrest. "If you had told me he had turned into Father Christmas, I would have been more likely to believe it," she said. She recalled that they never, ever spoke about politics. Catherine Pinnock, a Liberal Democrat councillor from Bristol who was appointed to the House of Lords in 2014, said that she was to have campaigned with Miss Cox on Thursday afternoon for Britain to remain in the European Union. Miss Pinnock said that Miss Cox had mentioned receiving some very unpleasant messages via social media. The West Yorkshire Police said Miss Cox had gotten 2 threats in the past, one of a sexual nature, at her offices in London. The Metropolitan Police, which protects the capital, said Miss Cox had alerted them in March to malicious communication by a man, whom officers detained and released with a warning. That man was not the killer, police said. Miss Cox, who would have turned 42 on Wednesday, was elected to Parliament for the district of Batley and Spen in May 2015. In just over a year, she had already established a strong reputation, speaking on behalf of refugees, children in poverty and children with autism. Hundreds of people packed St. Peter's Church in Bristol on Thursday night for a memorial service. Miss Cox's husband, Brendan Cox, said on Friday that a charitable fund had been set up in her memory.